Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. This is the second season, year 2 of our MIT Center for International Studies and True Africa University webinar series. This year, we have a 7-week series as opposed to an 11-week series last year. And it's great to be back. A lot happened, a lot is happening. It's very, very difficult times for very many people at the moment. And I wanted to start on a note of optimism because it's a great honor for me to be starting this new series with David Moinina Sengeh, my friend, who I met over a decade ago at MIT. I want to start with him because I think that he is the perfect embodiment of the spirit of optimism, of this can-do optimism that defines Africa and the future of Africa. And I would like to go back to some of the slide deck that I presented in the beginning that was rotating right now to kind of tell you a little bit about why I chose David as the opening speaker for our webinar series. So Laura, wondering if we can go there. So, this is all very personal to me because these are pictures that I took over the years. This is David, a picture that I took of David when he was doing his PhD at the MIT Media Lab. And he showed me this picture of this prosthetic limb that he created along with the team at the Media Lab. And it was really interesting the way he kind of showed me that process of creation against the background that we know as Africans, as West Africans, the world knows of what happened in Sierra Leone, his home country during the Civil War. And just, he's constantly always trying to find solutions. David had come to the US, he studied at Harvard University, and then he did his PhD at MIT. And when he was wrapping up, everybody was trying to recruit him, whether it was Harvard University, Google, and then he chose back to go to Nairobi to work at IBM. And now he is the Minister of Basic and Secondary, Primary Secondary Education in Sierra Leone, along with also being the Chief Innovation Officer of Sierra Leone, which is really just a stone's throw from my own country, Togo. And I want to maybe show a few more slides that kind of maybe paint a picture of this journey. So this is just an image that was that photo that I took at the Media Lab of the way that some of these prosthetic limbs could be used. This is such a wonderful, wonderful kind of iteration of a series of innovations, experiments that lead to products that really can actually help to save people all over. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is a picture of us again at the Media Lab, the biomechatronics lab, which was, again, where a lot of things happen in a very kind of understated, quiet way with maximum efficiency. Maybe in the next photo, this is somebody who inspired us a lot, Kelvin Doe, a young teenage prodigy that David brought to MIT, and then he became a bit of a real star in our environment, all the way to speaking at the TED conference and the TED Talk, and being kind of introduced by Chelsea Clinton and a bunch of other people. And this is somebody who kind of came out of a lot of our really underserved environments in Africa, where there's so much innovation, so many astute solution finders everywhere, but who never actually get the recognition because Africa is still being painted as the continent of misery and despair. And maybe the next slide could be really good. That's a picture of David and Kelvin again at the Media Lab when he came to just kind of find ways to take his inventions to the next level. Maybe a next slide. This is actually a picture that David took in April of 2019, when we were at the TED conference, the annual TED conference in Vancouver. And this is actually the president of Sierra Leone, who was just about to speak, actually. And that the theme for that conference, which I absolutely loved, was bigger than us. And if you go to the next slide, I took this picture of what the president was speaking about. And what the words here, which I'm going to read, is, as president of Sierra Leone, Julius Maada Bio seeks to find ways to make progress happen, not to dwell on the obstacles that impede it, which is, again, contrary to a lot of African mentalities, especially in leadership, where people always talk about the problems and not about the solutions and finding ways to make progress happen. Maybe the next slide could be good. And then I was really inspired by this, this panel that was actually shown right after the president of Sierra Leone spoke. And it was a James Baldwin quote. Baldwin is one of my absolute heroes. And it says, "Those who say it can't be done are usually interrupted by others doing it." And that is my way of introducing David Moinina Sengeh today. He is an absolute inspiration to many of us, those of us who are products of MIT, those of us who are hopeful Africans, optimists, and those who just happen to want Africa to succeed because and thanks to its talent. So I want to stop there. I want to thank the MIT Center for International Studies for allowing us to have the second series, for funding the second series. I want to thank John Turman, Dick Samuels, Michelle English, Laura Kerwin, Eric Jacobowitz. There's just a lot of people who helped to make this happen. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to David so that he could tell you about the work that they're doing to reinvent education in Sierra Leone through innovation, sorry.
Thank you very much, Claude. You can hear me?
We can hear you.
And you can see my slides.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you, Claude, and thank you to MIT. It's always fun to be on campus, albeit this time it's virtual. The good thing about being virtual is I am not in the cold, and it's very warm and shiny and wonderful out here in Sierra Leone. And today's talk really is a conversation I look forward to discussing with you and talking about how Sierra Leone is innovating in education. I think there are many words here that people might pause and take a second look at, which is Sierra Leone innovating education. And that's what this talk is about. So Sierra Leone innovating, what does that even mean? And I think it stems from a couple of things. So in 2018, the president won the election, and there's a new government, a new direction government, and he appointed me as Chief Innovation Officer. At the time, I was at IBM, and I remember actually that I was at TED. So it's interesting you mentioned TED. I was at TED conference, and I had just been at Harvard and MIT. I'd met President Reif, and the president texted me to say, "I won. Do you think you can consider coming back?" And I remember sending a message like, "Oh, well, maybe now is not a good time. I never know. Thank you for asking me. I think, let me think about it." And I went back and I sent him a message soon after thinking about it, saying, "Yes, I'd love to come." And he said, "Well, come in. I want you to come and lead on innovation in Sierra Leone and technology." And it was really exciting for me because these are things that I'd always imagined and dreamed about and wished that we can practice. I've been working on youth entrepreneurship. I've been at IBM. And the challenge that existed was, you're in IBM private sector. So actually, when you're at research first, you're a researcher at MIT, you build a prototype for $10,000, and maybe you win some MIT Ideas Award for $25,000, but you need money to scale it. And then you take private sector, and private sector comes and they scale it, and maybe you spend $1 million in private sector, but you need governments to do it. So I left the Media Lab feeling like I want my idea scaled. I went to IBM Research, and we worked with the government of Sierra Leone at the time, actually post-Ebola data analytics work, but they couldn't scale it. And so when President Doe asked me to come, I said, sure. The first thing we're going to create is a national innovation and digital strategy. And that national innovation and digital strategy focused on digitization for all identity, economy, and governance was launched by the president himself. in 2019. And it's a 10-year strategy. And the people who then were part of DSTI, the Directorate of Science, Technology, and Innovation, on the left, they're young people, they're young men, young women, people in private sector, people in government who are thinking about innovation and how to improve service delivery, as I mentioned, for governance and for individuals. And so yes, Sierra Leone innovating, but what does that even mean? You're like, people use these terms all the time. And in Sierra Leone, our National Innovation and Digital Strategy has 3 guiding principles. One is mobile first. The other one is country as AI lab, and then hybrid technology systems. And I'll speak a little bit to the hybrid technology systems for this particular talk in education. But you might think, oh, we don't really do AI in Sierra Leone, but that will not be true, because we've published papers, research papers in education, where we use AI on all the data that we got to predict learning outcomes. But we also are working with private sector companies like Macro Eyes, who are doing health AI analytics in Sierra Leone. Why mobile first? Actually, you can also see the big changes that has happened with mobile connectivity. In about 4 years, mobile connectivity has gone from about 60% to over 80%. And this is just based on the private sector, the 2 telcos that we have, engaging governments and with different government policies. And mobile connectivity has also gone up. I mean, I think at this point we're in the above 23, 25%. And you can see that this steady progress for connectivity has been there. But the biggest jump has been in mobile coverage and penetration. And then we also don't just talk about that. We also have deployed drone technology in rural communities. This is a drone that was what you see there, hybrid, that health center you see with the person in pink, that's the health center. And that's a drone coming to land. 13 minutes is what it took this drone. The nearest town, if you just use an ambulance, is 2 hours away. And we did this the drone drug delivery just late last year, 1 year after we launched the drone corridor. And as we speak, there are people who are in Sierra Leone testing several drone delivery flights, and we're looking at engaging the Ministry of Health, how we can incorporate this into what we do. So yes, there's innovation happening in Sierra Leone, and it's informed by these different government policies and these young people who I spoke about. So I was a CIO for about 1.5 years, and then it pleased His Excellency to appoint me Minister of Education. There's what we call the Free Quality School Education, which is what the government ran on, the government's flagship program. And the impact of it has been tremendous. And I'm just showing you here the enrollment by year and districts, right? The districts, we have about 16 districts in the country. You can see that from 2012 to 2014, enrollment was stable. And then there was Ebola. And in many parts, enrollment dropped. So if you look at Tonkolili, the black band at the bottom, enrollment dropped significantly. If you look at Kenema, which is in the east, the enrollment dropped. Actually, Cambia enrollment dropped. Kailan enrollment dropped. These are remote communities after Ebola, and these were Ebola epicenters. Tonkolili was a major epicenter. Kailan, obviously, Kenema, where the largest drops happened, is where Ebola was really based, and you can see the impact this had. And if you fast forward between 2014 and 2018, that's 6 years. It's again very stable. And then you see something magical happen. The president came and said, everybody can go to school, free quality school education. We removed tuition fees for everybody. We removed examinations fees for everybody. And what people don't understand is not in modern history have you added 10% of the population without it imploding. Yes, we have large full classes. Yes, we do have kids who sit under in hard conditions. Yes, teachers are less in number, but the system did not implode. And we, at this time, are now doing everything to remove malpractice, to streamline, to include data. We're doing so many things at the same time, whilst adding 10% of the population, over 700,000 people in one single year with the free college school education. And we then made tuition free, examinations free, expanded school feeding, and a whole bunch of stuff that I'll share about. And a lot of people say, well, is there really quality? It's just free tuition, but there's no quality, and we'll speak about that towards the end. For me, because I was coming from, with my background in data science and a CIO, we had to reimagine education with data. Data has power. I just showed you when we connected the annual school census from 2012 all the way to 2020, where we digitized. And then from 2015 to 2020, we have a database where I used to make decisions, everybody. So the data for decision-making platform is how we make our decisions. And it's really important that data on teachers we have, data on facilities we have, data on enrollment, and there's nothing we do at this ministry where we don't use data. What do those data look like? We know where all the schools are. I know where absolutely all, at this point, we have 12,000 schools. We're just finishing our data census, annual school census now. And the challenge we have actually is in the Western area where some schools, private schools, don't want to submit their data, but that's a separate challenge. But I know where all the schools are. We know where all their connectivity is. We know how many teachers are there. We know all of these information. We can layer it on population at the disaggregated level. We can layer it on facilities, on roads. And this is really our strength that has used to inform what we do. And then COVID happened, and everybody was thinking, well, 1.6 billion people were out of school in Sierra Leone. The number was 2.6 million. But then the question was, what do you do? How do you deploy EdTech? And in MIT, at the Media Lab, when we're talking about EdTech, we're talking about personalized learning and individual sensors, and it's not something that you can scale. But for us, because we have the National Innovation and Digital Strategy that speaks about hybrid technology, which informs what we do, we then went into how do you deploy hybrid EdTech for continuous learning and teaching? Radio, television, mobile and web, print, and tangible. And, you know, if you're just anybody who's listening to this talk, you're like, yeah, African people, or yeah, technologies, they just say big words. But for us, we implement them. It's not just big words. These are things that we do on a daily basis. For the radio program, the recent early grade reading assessment, which is done independently by Montrose and UNICEF, show that 87% of our students listen to the education radio. We expanded education radio in communities that never had radio. And right now, as I speak, the ministry will bought about 4 transmitters that will take radio to communities. We want to reach every child in this country to have access to radio. And this is where we're providing content, developing content. And we also give physical radio. We've distributed well over 40,000 radio handsets with solar, particularly to girls and people in communities. So not just do we provide content, we're also giving you devices. And we use it for teacher training. And these are radios that have USB sticks. There's no reason why you cannot give somebody content on USB sticks that they can listen at their time. TV, we have a TV station at the ministry. It's been slow to start going up and down, but we worked with the Sierra Leone Broadcasting Service to work with to play some of our TV programs, both local TV and other private TV. On web and mobile has been really the most transformational of the stuff that we've done. USSD, as you well, maybe you did not see, right? But I mentioned mobile coverage was now about 87% of the population. And USSD can be anywhere. 2G, 1G, you can use USSD. You don't need mobile connectivity. And in here, we build systems like a dictionary app. You and I take Google for granted. You know, when you're writing on Word, it spell checks for you. You're happy, right click, spell check, you correct it. So you don't have to worry about it. But if you're a child in Sierra Leone or somebody who does not have a dictionary or who does not have a computer, actually, you're not getting literate. You're not learning. You're not picking up new words. So we built a SMS-based USSD mobile dictionary. The during COVID that we deployed for everybody. Every morning at 7 a.m., I get word of the day that comes, and we have thousands of kids who use that. Today's word of the day actually is predilection, a preference of special liking for something. I guess I have a special liking for education appropriately. We also built a system where any child anywhere in the country can literally check their results when it comes out. It used to take 10 weeks. It used to cost up to $10. And if you're in places like Falaba up north or Kailan, you didn't even have access to your results in the same time as if you were in Freetown or in the urban areas. So we built a system where the minute results come, every child, wherever can access it by sending an SMS. That system has been used over 2 million times as I speak. And some of these systems we've also deployed across for placement of kids, so you don't have to bribe, a parent doesn't have to worry about what school you got into. We automatically build algorithms that tell you which school you're placed into. We use the same for developing policy conversations. Actually, it's a solution a friend of mine from the Media Lab had built Pop-Pop, where you can get citizen engagement in policy, and we deploy Pop-Pop. So all the policies we roll out in Sierra Leone, we put it up on Pop-Pop, and people can participate and communicate with it. We have classroom and school management apps that we've deployed. I can see all schools that have been monitored and visited by school quality assurance officers we recruited. I recruited 160 of them, gave them motorbikes, tablets, and all those things. I mentioned hybrid technology. Paper is technology. We forget about that often. And actually, we then build these home support learning packets that we send. And it's very exciting, actually, because these ones just landed today. And these are for class 6 kids. It says here, supplementary study pack for underperforming schools. And with what we did last year, we printed them on A4, but this time we have books where our teaching service commission developed content that we give to underperforming schools. We care about, because of the data, we know where kids are not performing, who get 0% in exams. So we send these physical materials to them in how to reach areas, and we see that their performance is improving. Okay, I will wrap up soon so that we can have a conversation. But we're doing so much, but it's not just for us in Sierra Leone, it's globally. And I mentioned this just to say it's not about us tooting our horn or because we're special, but we're privileged, actually. I take it as a privilege that we're at the table on all global conversations. GPE is a $4.55 billion organization. It's the largest platform for raising resources for global education, over 60 countries that they're implementing in, including Sierra Leone. I serve on the executive committee of the GPE board, and we're actively engaging, and that's how we were able to get as many countries to sign up to the Uhuru Declaration that said domestic financing in education should be high. Africa is leading on that, and many African countries have increased their domestic financing. We'll keep calling on for more. I'm the co-chair, Sierra Leone. The president is the co-chair with the Director General of UNESCO, and I serve as the co-chair of the technical committee, the Sherpa group, with the Assistant Director General of Education of UNESCO, Education 2030 High-Level Steering Committee, and I'll be co-chairing with the Deputy Secretary General, Madam Amina Mohamed, the Transformation Education Summit with the UN Secretary General at the highest levels of SDG 4. And also I chair the UNESCO GEM report. So which is the Global Education Monitoring. In global monitoring, global policy and prioritization and financing, Sierra Leone sits there squarely. And what this means is just this week, for example, we worked with GPE to have a meeting with ministers of education from around the world to speak about, guess what? EdTech. And it was really wonderful to see ministers from Guyana, ministers from Asia, Africa, and Europe speaking about how we do this. And this happens because we are in those conversations. But people are like, yeah, you're just talking, blah, blah. Well, I get a lot of criticisms. Is there really quality? Can you really change education? We don't want to change education, we want to transform education. We believe it's possible. We see it happen in front of our eyes. When I joined, I said to people, it can take 6 years, it's next generation. But we've seen that in 3 years, specific things that we're doing has led to tangible, measurable outcomes. We've trained over 20,000 teachers and over the last 3 years, and we'll keep training more and more. In our early grade reading and assessments and early grade math, we've have all the zero scores. That means the scores where the kids got zero. These is for kids in class 2, end of class 2, grade 2 and grade 4, which speaks about their readiness for school and whether they are learning. We have literally improved within the last 6 years, but primarily because of what we've done, because in the free quality school education, we added pre-primary education. There wasn't pre-primary education before, and trained and recruited those teachers. We saw that's why those kids in class 2 are doing as well. In the national school exams, the transition exams, we've improved pass rates by upwards of 30%. And we have also added the number of kids who are taking the exams. So it's not that, oh, it's the same or fewer kids. We have expanded reach and access to every chiefdom. But yet still we're doing better. We have more girls who are passing these exams. Gender parity, we're almost at gender parity. A couple years ago, we were at 60%. In 2018, we were at 80%. Last year, we were at 94%. I do think we're gonna be closer to meeting gender parity because of the policies that we've done in place. School feeding, important nutrition, we've expanded it by 400%. You know, people say, oh, school feeding was there. Yes, it was there, it's great, but we've actually gone now to every district, and the number of children being fed, we're feeding about 450,000 kids today. The curriculum, I speak to my colleague ministers around the world, they're like, oh, we can't change the curriculum. We've changed and updated the curriculum for early childhood education, basic education, senior secondary education, and civic education, and adult literacy, and adult financial, and we'll do the rest, all in the last 3 years. It's absolutely one of the most exciting curriculum that we have that focuses on computational thinking, hands-on learning, civics, critical thinking. We've recruited over 12,000 teachers, which teachers make up about 40% of the civil service and of the wage bill. So it's a big deal to our teachers. Every time you add a teacher, it directly goes to the wage bill. And we increased the salaries of teachers in the year of COVID by about 30%. It reflected in April of 2020, and 10% of their benefits. And then we have the Best Teacher Award, and we travel with our teachers everywhere. Teaching profession is now once more celebrated. There are still about 25,000 teachers who are community teachers, and we are never going to train enough teachers with our teacher training systems right now. You know, I support one of the kids who's studying arts in the university. He's the only candidate at Magai University doing arts. And if you want to have arts education and music and things like that, or science, we're not going to have. So we need to think outside the box a little bit. Again, Sierra Leone is the only country that I know of that expanded its education budget in the year of COVID and post-COVID. And that's because of the president's willingness to invest in education, where now 22% of our budget is on education. And everybody is shown, you know, I was just talking to the guys at FCDO, the UK, they do this secondary grade learning assessment. And from what they've seen, there was no apparent learning loss. And in fact, what we have recorded in our national exams, our kids did better in the national exams and more transitions than before COVID. And the reason is not by magic, it's because we had a radio teaching program, we had these physical support materials, we brought them on, we limited learning loss, we closed schools at the right time, we opened schools, we trained people, we didn't have transmissions much in school. When there was, we were able to break the chain. We're also investing in infrastructure, building 100 plus new or upgraded classrooms, 400 plus classrooms, 400 plus schools, 400 plus classrooms, and distributed over 30,000 furnitures. It's not enough. There's always going to be more that we need to do. And we just are now in the process of building 510 classrooms over the next 3 years through a World Bank projects that we have. We have new policies like radical inclusion, the ban against corporal punishments that are really changing how people think about education, harmonized teacher policies, new programs and initiatives. We have a youth advisory group. I believe that if we're serving young people, I was a young person and an activist once. And I remember when people did not listen to me, and I want to change that. So I'm bringing young people to be in the highest level advisory of the ministry. We have new plans. The education sector plan is being developed and finished now. And our guiding principles remain the same in education. Radical inclusion, we stop at nothing until every child can access and safely stay in school. Comprehensive safety, the school must be the safest environment for any child, anybody, any teacher, anybody that they should find safety in school. They should want to go to school. Universal access, money should not be a reason why you don't go to school. Tuition should not be. People like to confuse free education to, oh, but it's not free because I still pay. You have to pay for everything, but you don't pay for tuition. You don't pay for food when there's school feeding. You don't pay for examination fees. You don't pay for materials like this that we provide you. You don't pay for core textbooks. You don't pay for exercise books that we provide. So we lower the cost of domestic financing of education. Quality teaching and learning is important. Now, I wrote there, come join us, because we do have lots of people who work with us. We have folks from MIT who've been here. We work with some people from Harvard regularly, Harvard and Yale more regularly than MIT. But I'm curious to hear and listen and to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. I wanted to say, for those who were with us last year, that we did get a bit of feedback that there's a bit of Zoom fatigue everywhere right now, because people have been on Zoom now for 2 years, and we decided to shorten the sessions from 60 minutes to 50 minutes. So we have about 15 minutes left here. And I wanted to start with something I noticed. Actually, it was in September 2019. It was during the UN General Assembly. I was invited to the Africa Center because it was a conversation between Aliko Dangote, who was Africa's best-known entrepreneur, Nigerian businessman, billionaire, richest African, and Bill Gates, who I guess up until recently was the richest man in the world. And they were talking about the fact that, they had both pledged $25 million to the Africa Center. And then Bill Gates said that he, through his foundation, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, was going to invest $5 billion in Africa over the next 5 years. And that money actually has increased because of the pandemic. And what Gates said to me, said to the group, and that really was interesting to me, was that he needs to really work really closely with government, because you cannot enact systemic change at a really high scale unless you work hand in hand with the government. So my question to you, David, is, how was it moving from the private sector, say with the work you were doing at IBM in Nairobi and elsewhere, to working in the government, which is very, governments are known for bureaucracy, red tape, and all that. So how was that transition for you?
The political answer is because of the president, but the non-political answer is it's because of the president. I mean, I can't say this enough. There's no way I'll do what I'm doing if President Bill did not believe in education and human capital development and technology. He's the guy, he's the person who texts me about how we digitize systems. He's the one who's curious about what innovations we roll out. He understands, he wants to learn programming. He wants to think about how we fight ghost teachers. I mean, I do think that you have, and across cabinets, right? So in government, everybody, now there's nobody in government who doesn't speak about radical inclusion, actually. And somebody in the chat was mentioning how does radical inclusion fit with the group that they work with, humanity and inclusion. One of our innovation and things that we've done, actually, to your point, is there's an NGO consortium who we work with, which humanity and inclusion is part of, and they are implementing the radical inclusion. I just spoke to them today, the consortium, and they are giving all these eyeglasses and other things to kids across the country based on tests that they do with Ministry of Health. So Ministry of Health, Ministry of Gender, Ministry of Planning, everybody speaks the same language, and it's driven by human capital development. Was it difficult? It was very difficult. Look, when I came at first and I'll be on the radio, I used to speak about data, and everybody's like, we don't eat data. Don't talk about technology. We need water. Oh, you see, it's because you come from MIT. Oh, you feel like, And I was very frustrated, and I went to the president again, and I was like, look, listen, I get really frustrated. And he said, I listened to you on the radio. You have to explain to people what data is. And then I went back and I explained data and what the importance of this is. And today, I promise you, there's no day you turn on the radio, no day in which somebody does not say, show me the data, show me the evidence. And it's beautiful to see that. I'm coming on the radio again today. I'm listening to the radio. Somebody's talking about radical inclusion. There's almost no day in which you don't hear the word radical inclusion or data or policy in Sierra Leone. And it's beautiful to see how this has been translating into the ecosystem of innovation and entrepreneurship that we want to build.
Well, that leads me to my question about data and what you said about data for decision making. You said data is power. And I was thinking about that because, when I was a student at MIT, one of my favorite classes was, and I actually have the book with me here in my office, it's Data Models and Decisions. That was one of my favorite classes at MIT Sloan. And the issue, though, that I find as somebody who does a lot of work on the African continent is that data is hardly ever available. Even when we were setting up True Africa University, we had a really, really hard time finding data on what is advanced degree, the state of advanced degrees in say Togo and other countries across Africa. So how do you go about gathering data that is accurate?
You will get it. I mean, I think it's parts of it. And I was just talking to some students yesterday, like you have to, if you're like, it's gonna take a lot of time. 1 week later, you're gonna say, it's gonna take a lot of time. 1 month later, you're like, it's gonna take a lot of time. If you started 1 month ago, you would have gone somewhere. So one of the things that we did actually within DSTI was we went in search of data. Before I was minister here, I knew where all the schools were. Now at the DSTI integrated GIS system, we know where all the hospitals are, where all the police stations are, where all the schools are, where all the health clinics are, where all the courts are, we know all of that location based. And I think you're right that the data are not there, and often people just don't care. So you have to go collect the data. I want to know how many radio programs we have. I asked my team to ask all our partners to do it if we're not data conscious. And we also work with, somebody also asked about universities. We collaborate, and you mentioned Sloan. We work a lot with Sloan and various universities, and Lily, Professor, where we did a lot of good conversation around, with COVID. Everybody was locking down communities for 3 weeks, 6 weeks, and people were screaming, Sierra Leone has to lock down. We locked down for 3 days, twice, and it worked out very well for us. And we've been managing COVID because we've been using data and policy. We did a survey actually all across the country to find out what's the maximum time of day you can lock down people. And it was 3 days. We used that information, we locked down for 3 days, and we're fine. We condensed what we need to do. So we have to get the data.
Well, there's loads of questions coming into the Q&A here. So I'm just going to take them one by one. And we'll probably have time for 3 questions before we wrap up. And the first one, you talked a little bit about radical inclusion and how it's linked to national innovation and digital strategy. Thanks, Julia. But Julia had a follow-up question. She still wants to hear a bit about the examples you have for accessible and inclusive edtech.
Yeah, okay. So because I'm crazy like that, I have a dream. I think every child should learn how to read Braille and sign by the time they're in class 1. If you're going to learn ABCs and you're a child and your brain is elastic, you might as well learn how to read Braille and how to read sign. And I think then we can really have inclusive education. And so how we build learning tools that allow for that to be the case, that our ABC solutions have Braille and sign language there as well. I think that we test and provide eye care or disability wheelchairs or various things. It just requires us to take the actions to get inclusive education, forcing the integration.
Great. Carlos says that he's a teacher in Mexico and he wants to see how we can cooperate with Africa's universities for innovation in the next years.
I think they can just reach out to any faculty that they want to collaborate with or where, and the conversations can happen. It has to be driven by individual faculty.
Wonderful, individual faculty. Yeah. Jacqueline wants to know if you could share your experience deciding languages of instruction and of edtech systems where local languages differ greatly from official languages. This is an issue we have all over Africa.
Yeah, I do think it's a debate, really, to be honest, that it's a principled debate. Literacy levels in Sierra Leone is low, particularly for adults. And I want literacy to be high, so I'm going to focus on teaching in English because that's what the official language and working language is. It's not the other things. And so for us, it's very clear. At some point in the future, we'll speak about mother language, but there's so many other things wrong with the system that I want to fix the system first. The data, the supervision, the quality of teachers, the teaching, the tuition, the examinations, and all of that, that I haven't really, I think it makes sense, but I go with official language.
Yeah. One thing that I noticed about you is that one thing we have in common is we very much like to identify young talent and to help to nurture that talent. And Nicole from Zimbabwe is asking how basically she can get involved as a young person.
Yeah.
She just graduated from Bates College in Maine last year. And she wants to know how young people can actually get involved.
And Nicole, come to Freetown and you meet me. But I was young when I was giving. I'm the youngest person in this role ever. The president did not say, oh, you're 32, 33. I'm not going to make you CIO and make you senior advisor. But when I was in college, people gave me projects to manage that were valued over millions of dollars. I remember the one laptop per child program with Nicholas. I remember Global Minimum, where I managed personally millions of dollars. And I was young and it turned out well. And so it's not a question of, you know, and other people invested in me. I see that Laris is here. They gave me resources when I was students at MIT and never said, you're a master student, so we're not going to invest in you.
Well, Lars,
so I have to do it.
Yeah, well, Lars actually asked a really interesting question, which I think, you know, our whole series and the whole reason for being for True Africa University is sustainability. And Lars is asking how, you know, these changes can be sustained over time.
It's a good point. The people are brought along, consultation. I mean, you know, for radical inclusion, there was a lot of resistance, but today when the president goes to a district and he gives the chief a mic, 3 minutes to speak, the chief goes, thank you for radical inclusion. Whether I'm there or not, or the president's there or not, that chief is gonna believe in radical inclusion. But the team here, we're building and we're learning a lot. Other ones, you make it law and we will change the laws and you put it in policy. And somebody's not going to come and say, now pregnant girls cannot go to school. We'll put it in law and they have to go through parliament.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it's a parliamentary democracy. And so if we stay on this topic, which is radical inclusion, which has been one of the main drivers of our conversation today, I want to maybe take one last question from Catherine, who's asking, how do you engage with other African countries on this radical inclusion agenda? And I say that, I know Catherine is a Pan-Africanist like I am, like you are. That's, to me, also a very important question.
I mean, I do, to be honest. I engage my colleague ministers. I have a minister friend, I'm not going to name which country. He's older, he's very old, he's a professor. And he will come to me and goes, you know, Sengeh, this radical inclusion, you know, I'm going to tell you, I'm conservative, you know, I don't believe in the way it is. So I'm going to watch how you do it for a few years and then I do it, you know, they're my colleagues and it's funny. I'll be like, Professor, you should just do it, you know, you should be. It's like, no, I have to take it slowly. And I think we do engage, we do collaborate. Hopefully they see that these ideas are leading to good results that, like, as I mentioned, transition levels, gender parity, we're getting more money for education. They will then see that, oh, maybe I should do some of those things as well.
Great, well, thank you. I have one final question, which I managed to sneak in there in the last minute. And it's 3 books that have inspired you. I got that from Ezra Klein, and I asked it last year, and I want to do it again. Just, you know, it's a curveball.
This is a question you have to tell somebody before, but I would say one of them is Shimon Peres's book, you know, No Dream, Small Dreams was the thing about something for small nations. And I think it was really good. It showed us why it's important for us to to dream as small nations and how you can get that done.
Mm-hmm. And then, so one, maybe two more, or
another one. I found myself quoting Chinua Achebe a lot, and things fall apart recently. It's a gem. It's really beautiful. It has amazing parables and things. And I remember I still quote it. I still reference it.
I do too. And it's still always number one. It's the one that gets mentioned the most often when I ask this question.
It is such a good book. And it's not because it's just classic. And then this other one is not a book, but I say hip hop, rap music. I mean, Eminem is crazy, but he does have lots of things that I reference. So he does have a book, actually. Eminem does have a book that I have.
But what's his best album? We'll add an album. We'll add an album.
I wouldn't go into the best. I wouldn't go into best album, but some of his best lines is like, you only get one shot, do not miss your chance to blow. This opportunity comes once in a lifetime, you better. And I feel like I always do that. It's like, you have one, you better. It's you got one chance.
Wonderful. Well, this has been fantastic. This has been such a great opener for us. We have more government officials coming. Next week we have Sina Lawson, the Minister of Digital Economy in my home country, Togo. The final session will be with President Yayi Boni of Benin, former President Yayi Boni of Benin. Next week, we're going to talk about how the internet is transforming Togo. Again, True Africa University is committed to accelerating Africa's sustainable development, as we said, by mobilizing a global network of academic, industrial, and institutional partners. And then I want to thank MIT Africa and Ari and his team, everyone at the MIT Center for International Studies for making this happen. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Minister David Moinina Sengeh, for giving us this time and for allowing us to open so many imaginations for interesting conversations around the future of Africa. I'm Claude Granitsky. I was your host. I will see you again next week. Thank you all.